right. What is up, everybody? Isaac here with Civil Engineering Academy. Excited to be with you today. Another fun podcast episode. Today, we talk about salaries, everything to do with them, including, typically the normal progression for a civil engineer in the career industry. As you start your career, what levels you should be experiencing and how long that should take. We also talk about typical salary ranges as you start out, but we also dive into how you should be negotiating a salary if it's time to ask for a raise. And we also talk about jumping into a job offer once, if you ever move jobs or you get a different job and you first get that offer, what you should do with it if you feel like you should negotiate an offer, some of the questions you should be asking yourself. So it's going to be a fun episode. Definitely, you're going to want to check it out. And I do this with my brother, Mark. He comes back on again. So it's going to be a good time. So if you are also preparing for your civil engineering career, make sure you check out civilengineeringacademy.com. Go check out our resources if you're preparing for your FE or PE exam, because that's going to be the springboard to the rest of your career, and it will definitely demand higher raises as you get those credentials. So definitely check us out if you haven't already. So with that, let's bring Mark on and let's get rolling.
Hey, Isaac. Thanks for bringing me on again.
Yes, indeed.
It's always a good time, man. Always love it.
Well, we like you coming on because you got the wisdom and the knowledge.
Yeah. That's just a nice way. That's a euphemism for you're old.
Well, I didn't want to say that, but everyone's getting older, so it's just part of the game. Well, this is going to be fun. So we're going to talk about salaries, but the very first thing that typically happens in someone's engineering career, obviously, is you typically have different levels that you jump into. So why don't we talk about first a typical engineer's journey and maybe the levels that they are going to see as they progress with more experience. So can you dive into that a little bit?
Yeah. So, I mean, you're usually, even when you're in school, you're getting a little experience as an intern. You're involved with an engineering firm or maybe a construction firm or a firm that's employed in, I don't know, the area of civil engineering that you're most interested in, that you plan on working in. You're employed by that company as an intern. That's where a lot of people start. I know the firm I work for, we love our interns because we get to see how they do and get a feel for who they are and their abilities before they even graduate from their bachelor's degree programs. But usually from there you get I think started, or you get to the position of an engineer one or an associate, and that's right when you've graduated. So you're still trying to get your feet underneath you and build your credentials and your experience. But from there, and different firms kind of have different, I would say, graduations or different levels that they split these things out at, Isaac. But you're probably going into an engineer one, which would be an associate, engineer two, which would be someone who's got some career experience, maybe 3 to 5 years. Then you can get into an engineer three level, which is more of a senior type engineering level with, 5 to 10 years experience. And then once you get up above there, you can move into maybe being a principal or a engineering manager, where maybe you're the head of a team of technical people, a team of engineers that you're actually directing on whole projects, making sure that the objectives are being met and everybody's going in the right direction. Those are the levels for principal engineers or managers, and they're the guys with like the 10 plus type years experience.
All right.
And I know those are kind of the levels I think that we're dealing with, aren't we, Isaac?
Oh yeah, and I know some firms, some places, some industries chop up these levels and also into different levels as well. So maybe you've reached that career level, maybe that midpoint level, and maybe they have another level within that, as long as it's showing some progression towards additional, I guess, levels or years of experience that relate to those levels. So, and that's kind of the typical progression. Usually, though, when you become a senior engineer, I have found, and we've talked about this before, but usually around that time, people start to, I wouldn't say branch out, but they do show where their interests are. They might find a different path, whether it's staying in engineering or using the engineering background to venture into something else. There's a lot of different paths you can head to, but that's the typical journey. And I would just add, as we're talking about salaries, that each one of these levels is typically a bump up. And based on my years of experience, my experience in places I've worked, from what I've seen, typically those levels are around 10% for a bump up in title.
I would agree with that.
That's kind of what I've seen.
Yeah, it's a little bit more than your incremental yearly raises that you should be getting, but yeah, I would agree with that.
All right. So let's jump back. And this could happen at any stage of your career. But if we're talking about salaries, maybe when it's time to increase your salary or even how to negotiate a salary, one of the things that people get all the time is that you're going to get a job offer. So, you're done with your internship. Let's say you're trying to jump into being an associate engineer, engineer level 1, and you get a job offer. And this applies to any of these levels, really. But the moment that someone gets an offer, do you have any tips around how to analyze that offer, what to make of the offer? Do they take the first offer? What are some of the things you think about as you see that?
Well, in my career, when I've had interns that I've really liked and I wanted to put them on as full-time employees, because they have, graduated and they're good, smart guys or smart gals, and we want to keep them around. I've I before they get to that point where they've graduated, I mean, hopefully we've had sit downs, yearly, at least yearly reviews of their performance. Um, but as a manager, I've liked to give them an idea of where that salary range is, where it's going to be once they graduated, um, and we're going to start them out. Um, I don't know that there's a lot of harm in doing that. It gets them a chance to be. I know what I offer. My new engineer 1 level employees is competitive, and so I'm not really worried about having them know what that range is. And what's interesting too is, the new, and I'll call them new because I'm old, right, Isaac? We've already
Hmm.
established that, but the the modern career center at most universities, I mean, they're very good about communicating what salary ranges are. they're they're pretty well in touch with the current market, and they know what their graduates are getting as far as compensation goes, and so they already know what the range they should be in. Now, if somebody's exceptional, then I mean, I've offered a little bit more than what, quote unquote, the market range is, because I think they're exceptional and I think they do a good job. But um, I think it's critical as somebody starting out that what the the ranges are in your market.
Yeah, I
And I
agree.
think the information is pretty ubiquitous. It's like, you know, I don't know. Even if it's not your career center at your university where you're completing your program, it's, Indeed and LinkedIn and Glassdoor. I mean, there's a million different services where you can actually get a feel pretty close to where you should be in salary. And so knowing that up front as you go in and go start, I mean, it not only it gives you a little bit of leverage, right? Because you know what you're worth. Um, it just, I don't know, it takes the sting out of it. It's just
All
like,
right.
it's just kind of an assumed thing, and we're going to put you on as a full-time employee, and bloop, this is the range we should have you in, and you're off and running. It's
That,
not.
that's good advice. So I would, at the end of the day, if you're just starting out and you're getting an offer, maybe it's your first job, you have a ton of tools and resources. And frankly, I'm looking back at my own life, and I remember when I was about to graduate, you're already hearing other engineers what they're getting, what the ballpark figure
Oh
is,
yeah.
and even when I graduated, some people were going to work for large construction companies. Yes, they had to go live in a trailer somewhere, but they were offered, the very high end of what I had expected as a civil engineer to make. And, you
Yeah.
find something local, maybe it's a little less, but, depending where you are, it feels like, and I'm just throwing this out there, but if you're just starting out, it feels like that range is somewhere between, 55 to 70K for a starting
Yeah.
engineer.
Yeah.
But,
Easy.
um,
I remember that now that you talk about that, Isaac. I remember that, back when we were riding dinosaurs, to school. um, that was a thing that got around. I mean, guys were graduating, they were getting hired,
yes,
and
it
they were like,
spreads.
"Hey, man, did you hear about so and so? He got hired over here, and he's making X
Yep.
dollars a year." And yeah, so that
It
that
spreads quickly
it
when
does
you're at the
spread.
university level,
Absolutely.
and the university is always pinging students for what their salaries are so they can, report it back, and probably goes full circle. So employers know what to offer or what the going rate is. So
Yeah. Yep.
it all is kind of circular. So, okay, well, that's the beginning journey. Let's say down the road, let's say you're a senior engineer and you're looking to change jobs. And I know for a fact that some states require transparency on what the salary range is for that position. What's your thoughts on
Yeah.
being open with salaries and
Well,
stuff like that?
I think that's depending on who your employer is. I would say a lot of publicly funded entities like your municipalities. I probably put your utility companies in this category, and they're a little more apt to be pretty transparent about their salary ranges for the different levels of engineer that we're talking about here. The different, and it's based on credentials and somebody's training and their level of education and all that stuff. And they're pretty transparent about that. But some private organizations, they're a little less apt to be transparent about what they're offering or what employees are earning. And it may be a little taboo to just openly talk about everybody's salary ranges. um you know you're sitting around the water cooler and you're like, hey,
What are you
hey,
making, man?
Susie, how much do you make a year? And those kind of conversations by management might be viewed as just kind of stirring up controversy and stirring up problems that are that they just don't want to have to deal with.
It
So
causes a lot of heartburn when you know
yeah,
what
and
your
so
neighbor's making and he's
and
making more than you.
yeah, and you're like, man, I do way more than that idiot over there. I deserve more than that. And
Yeah.
so that may be viewed as a problem. Being that quote unquote open about salary discussions, but with that said, you can still, given all of these outside resources that we talk about, you can still have a feel for where someone of your ability, your skill level, where they should have their salary, and then you can bring those types of issues up directly with your manager, rather than taking the gossip route,
Hmm.
and starting the gossiping going about it, because a lot of organizations they frown on that, right?
I don't like that.
They don't like that.
So let's say you got an offer, you're a senior engineer or something, and you're seeing the offer, and you just know that this is probably the low end. They threw a lower offer to you. How do you evaluate that as an engineer? Are you asking questions um, related to your own experience level? What are you looking at? How do you know maybe this is the lower end? And what are some of your thoughts?
Well, I think when you're asking for a raise, there's a lot of things you got to take into consideration. Is the company you're working for facing some kind of hardship? what the market that you're in. Is there like some impending market hardships that are coming, or the trends, everything trending negative? Have has your company just had a round of layoffs and you just survived that round of layoffs? You know, uh, all of those things kind of helps you, judge whether or not it's time to ask for a raise. But I think when you're actually asking, again, if you're armed with that information, you know where your range is for the skill level that you have. You can be grateful in your tone and your approach, as you kind of inform your boss, your manager. Hey, I know this is kind of the range that I should be in, and I think I deserve that. I think that's at least where I need to be. Um, and if you've got a case too where you think you deserve more than that, and maybe you've hit a big milestone, maybe you've landed a big client, maybe your work is responsible for a significant portion of the company's revenue. Um, those kind of things. I think you could definitely use that as a way to ask for even more than what you would say, your quote unquote um, your market level salary should be. Maybe you deserve a little bit more because you've brought in more revenue, or key clients, something to that nature. So um, there's those
Well,
things
and
to
I also
consider.
see that advice applies not only to negotiating a raise in the current place that you're at, but that could also be applicable to getting a new job offer from a new company, and you aren't satisfied with the initial offer that they're giving you. You could come back and say, well, based on my years of experience, based on the level that I was at or I am at, and knowing what the market is, I feel like the offer should be in this range as opposed to what you've initially sent to me. And so maybe I think your advice also applies to not only asking for a raise if you're at a current firm and you can show your work history and all those things you talked about, what kind of dollars the work I'm doing is bringing into the company.
Hmm.
But you could also use that if you've got a brand new offer from a whole new company. So I
Yeah,
think that's good advice there too.
good.
Um, let's dive into that. So we've talked about the stages, the journey of an engineer, and the different stages, levels that you can get at, salaries that kind of come with that. We've talked about getting a job offer, uh, negotiating that job offer a little bit. If you feel like, do you always take? I guess a lot of people say that you shouldn't take the first offer that comes to you. Is that a rule of thumb that you think you should follow?
Um, yeah, I would agree with that. Um, because it's I think it's the and I've done this as a manager. I mean, I want to make a fair offer, but it's like a typical negotiation. I'm not going to offer really high right off the bat. I try to kind of have a little bit of a back and forth to kind of get a feel for that individual's expectations, I
Hmm.
guess is the right word. And so it's kind of we pose it as kind of a question. So this is where we want to make your offer. What do you feel about that? How does that feel? You know, um, some people it's so that's great, and other people, if they've got a good argument about why that maybe isn't the level they should be at, or the salary where they should be, then I listen to their arguments. I've bumped new employees that I'm putting on. I've bumped their salaries, what I expected to pay them a little bit, because I gained maybe a new understanding about their background, or maybe I don't know, a new understanding about a specific skill that I didn't know that they had. Maybe wasn't on a resume, or maybe wasn't a lot of the things I look at as, character. Maybe it's something that I esteemed as, this individual has a little higher level of character than I thought, and I like that, and so I think that's worth more money. And so some of those things have come out as I don't know, not turn the tables on me, but just come back asking for a little bit more. And if they can substantiate it, then, I do it. If I can feel that that individual is worth it, I do it.
I think that's a good point you're making. I didn't really think about that, but most people, the time that you should bring up discussing the range of salary that you're kind of looking for is when a salary is offered. You usually don't bring that up as you're doing the interview. It's usually a bad sign when you're talking about salaries when they don't even know you.
Right.
So I would caution not to bring up salaries probably when you're in the interview. Usually that will come. Usually that comes after an offer is extended, and you kind of move to another phase
Sure.
of the whole interview process. But
Yes.
I think that's a good point that when that happens, then you start down this road of figuring out what their expectations are. Maybe you learn something you didn't know about them before. Maybe it wasn't on the resume, or maybe they feel their work experience was a little more meaningful in some areas that you thought wasn't a big deal. So that's good advice. I like it.
Yeah. Cause I like to deal with people's, I like to understand their typical reactions, right? To mostly adversity. How did you react to this specific instance where you encountered a lot of adversity? Whether it was, problems in your projects or problems with the individuals working on your projects or problems with clients, whatever that adversity was, how did you handle it? And if I can get a feel for, their character and how they handle those kind of things, and in my mind, those are the things that deserve more money. So sometimes I get to understand those things a little bit better as we're going through the salary negotiation, if you want to call it that.
Dun dun dun.
Dun dun
Yeah, I like
dun.
it. I like it.
Yeah.
Well, let's quickly talk about this before we kind of round this off. So we've talked about now, getting your job offer, kind of negotiations around that. The last kind of piece I want to touch on with salary, and we have talked about it a little bit, is asking for a raise and some of the tips around that. Um, you know, what I guess what's the appropriate time to ask for a raise? Is there an appropriate time? Should
Well,
should you be
I'd say
asking quick?
there's some good rules of thumb on that. I mean, if you've been employed by a firm for a while and it's been more than a year since your previous raise, you know, and things have changed. Maybe your workload has increased, your skill level. Maybe you've achieved that milestone success that we were talking about. Maybe you got a new client and your work is generating more revenue for the company. That's another reason it's probably time to ask for a raise. Obviously, the easy ones are if there's an upcoming evaluation. If your firm that you work for has a regular systematic program of evaluation, and yearly you're going to get assessed, and that assessment is coming up soon, then obviously that's a good time to do it. And then one that's obviously a good time is maybe you've been offered another job, right? Been
Hmm.
offered another job, and then you got to go in and talk to your manager about what you're being offered and why you're considering it, um, and that's a good time to sit down and say, hey, maybe I deserve a raise. I got all this demand in the market for my services. I got more offers. Do you want to match that, or what do you want to do? Let's talk. That's a good time too.
And I think there's some rules probably around that, because obviously if you're going to ask for a raise, you don't want to ask, like, you're not going to go skyrocket and ask for the moon here, and
No.
there's got to be a reasonable range that you're probably going to be asking for. Now, if you do have another offer, and let's say it's quite a bit more, maybe your workplace has not evaluated their salaries correctly, and you do show that to your boss, and you're just like, hey man, these guys are offering me like 20% more to do the same level of work. What can we do here? My history has been that even if you do show that, a lot of times the employer won't necessarily match it. but they will increase your current level.
Sure.
Um, maybe that's also playing part of that negotiation game a little bit, or maybe it's that, hey, you've got ties here, you've got history here,
Well,
and
and when
not
I've
giving
had
you the most makes sense.
yeah, and when I've had those kind of opportunities, I've always approached my boss with, I don't know, I like to call it, I guess, a kind of a spirit of gratitude. Like, hey, it's I've been made this offer. What I don't know. I've always tried to get him in the boat with me. Like, this is the offer I've been offered by this other company, and I'm considering it. What would you do?
Mm.
Kind of a thing. How would you approach this if you were presented with this opportunity? Kind of get them thinking from a perspective, maybe from your perspective. What would you do? How would you handle this kind of a thing?
I like it.
I've had some success taking that approach when I've been made job offers. So,
Well, let's go back to that. So, if you do have another job offer and you do bring that into the table, let's say that, this is not a normal like, hey, I need a raise. It's I have an offer. Um, it, I guess I'm trying to ask, like, is there a good time to say no to something? Like, let's say if you don't like the salary, you don't like the offer. Or maybe the offer is just so good that you go and talk to your boss about it. I guess sometimes there's a fine line
I
between
think.
like talking to them and like there's no way they're going to match this, and like
Well,
just wait.
right. So you need before, and I would say before you went and talked to your current boss about an offer that you're getting, I think you have to be decidedly for the offer. Like, it's got to be something that you're really considering jumping on, and you would jump on it if,
You got to be
um,
committed.
yes, it's not something like, oh, I got this offer. I know a guy in the industry, and he offered to me to, I could go work for him, and it's got to be a pretty solid offer, and you have to be pretty committed to accepting that offer. I would say before you would take any of these approaches with your current employer, right?
Yep.
Um, but yeah.
I'll say personally, like that's happened to me 2 or 3 times in my career, where I have been working, and whenever I've had another job offer, you have to be committed to taking that offer.
Hmm.
Um, because if you're not, what do you have? You don't.
That's right.
You got to be committed to it. And so, if you're
Yep.
going to go and talk negotiations and stuff, you better be committed to the offer
Yeah.
that you
Don't
have
even start
in
it
hand.
unless you've done your due diligence, and that offer that you have in hand is something that you would really like to accept. Make sure that you're all good with that
Okay, I like
before
it.
you do it.
Sweet, man. Any other tips regarding salaries, negotiations, or anything else?
Well, I would say that generally it's a good time for people's salaries and getting bumps in their wages. I mean, the uh, the industry that we're in, civil engineering as a whole, is just it's a great industry to be in. And we've talked about this before, Isaac, but civil engineering just covers so many areas, construction and utilities, and the traditional design engineer is just one little facet of what civil engineering as a career can cover. And it's just a really good time right now with all the investment in infrastructure and housing, and all the things that are being built in the built environment right now is just it's really created a nice environment for engineers to be successful and be able to negotiate higher salaries when as their skill levels and their responsibility levels go up. It's just a good overall environment for civil engineers to be in right now.
Yep,
Make a good living.
I like it. I see a lot of other people's hourly rates go up. You're walking by Subway and they're like making $18 an hour now, and you're like, "What the?
Yeah.
I was. Why'd I go to school?" Oh, just
Hopefully
kidding.
you're making a little more than 18. But if you are, if that's all you're making, we got to talk.
Hey, when I was an intern, that's what they were paying, and I thought that was good. I thought that was really good,
Yeah.
and that
Yeah.
slowly went up. But man, salaries have definitely gone up, and hopefully, they are going up in the civil engineering world too as rates
They
go
are.
up on the other
Yeah.
other side. So
Yeah.
anyway, good talk, good chat. Hopefully, this has been well worth it for people listening. If you've liked this episode, definitely give us a like. Give us some comments. We love to hear your comments in the chat room, in the comments, and appreciate you being here. So go check out civilengineeringacademy.com if you need more resources, help you on your journey to become a professional engineer. Thanks, Mark.
Yep. You bet.
All right, see ya.
Yeah.